you started, Karen?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first week of our Spring Rights Literary Festival. You've probably all looked at the website, springrights.org. There's 30 more events coming up. They're all free. And, you know, I can't even list all the events because there's so many, and they're just amazing. And I really want there to be really good-sized audiences in these events because the writers are so amazing. And that's my goal. So I am Robin Schwartz. I am the Program and Grant Director of the Community Arts Partnership. Spring Rights is one of our programs. And if you want to peruse our website to see what else we do, we also have 6 grant programs for local artists and organizations. It's at the, our web address is at the bottom of the Spring Rights rack card, which is in the back of the room. And I want to just thank our Spring Rights sponsors. They are Wegmans, the Marriott in downtown Ithaca, Ithaca College, CFCU Community Credit Union, the Odyssey Bookstore, M&T Bank. And our media sponsors are the Ithaca Voice, WITH Radio, WSKG, and Cinemapolis. And we get additional support from New York State Council on the Arts, Poets and Writers, and the Tompkins County Tourism Grant. And by the 40th Spring Right event, I will have memorized that. There are bathrooms down the hall if anyone needs that. And you know what? After this event is over, like in June, not this event, but all 40 events, I want to send everybody a survey about how you heard about the event, because I think that most people are hearing about it through personal invitations. And it just helps us know that, so we're not like spending money in places that we don't need to spend money. So I'm going to pass around a sheet so I can collect your names and emails, and ignore the fact that it says the Quilt Diva April exhibit. Don't get confused. That is my speech. So now I'm going to turn the mic over to Jen.
Sure.
Jennifer Savran Kelly.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Thank you. So thank you to Robin and the Community Arts Partnership for hosting us. This event is free and this has been happening every year, and it's pretty unbelievable that we have this in our small town. So I just want to thank Robin. She's been doing this for a number of years. And thank you to Kenneth McLaurin for videoing. Kenneth, while you're all still here and trapped, I'll tell you, Kenneth is doing an event on Wednesday night here with Chris Holmes and Keith Hannon that is short screenplays about race in America, and I think it's going to be funny.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's happening, and then we're just going to quickly introduce ourselves, and then the 3 of us will each read from our work, and then we'll have a discussion, and then we'll take your questions. So I'm Jennifer Savran Kelly. I'm a local writer.
I'm Kate Doyle. I'm also a local writer.
I'm Kvita. I'm also a local writer.
We'll say more
Later.
Okay. So I'm going to read a short story. I have a book of short stories coming out from Algonquin Books next summer. And Jen's book is also coming out for Algonquin. And this story is one of the ones I wrote later in the book. The book is about a lot about remembering and forgetting and how we use stories to make sense of what we've experienced. A lot of them are told from the point of view of young women. And some of the stories I wrote later in the book have a sort of surreal element to them. So this is one of those. In the years I lived in that neighborhood, when I was 27 and later 28, I visited the goldfish daily. I didn't want people to know. It was my one secret thing. I had this friend in the neighborhood. He asked me once at a party if I had ever seen the fish, and I lied beautifully. I said I didn't even know there was a community garden. What intersection? After that, I always brought a book to the garden in case I encountered my friend. If I saw him, I imagined I would turn the pages like I hadn't even noticed the fish, a flawless performance. I had a lie ready. This is my first time here. I felt there might be something between me and this man, but I was unwilling to lose the privacy of my daily ritual, even for him. One day, my friend called about a museum exhibit. He described dozens of perfect miniature staircases spiraling up and up. I said I wanted to see the exhibit. My friend said, "Where are you now?" In fact, I had been on the brink of entering the garden. I'm nowhere, I told him. I mean, I'm at home. I agreed I would meet him, but I allowed myself a few minutes with the fish. Their scaly forms glinted, their pinwheel fins twirled against the water. I was descending into the subway when I heard my phone ring again. The museum was closing, my friend said, but he had extracted a promise from admissions that we could go first thing tomorrow. This struck me as no great feat. Tomorrow was Saturday. The museum was always open. Let's go up the Empire State Building, I heard myself say. I'll meet you there, he told me. Some part of me wanted to go alone, perhaps, but now I had invited him. Was it an accident I rode the subway too far? I ended up in Queens. I got off the subway and stood on the open air platform. I imagined myself on the correct strand of the multiverse, arriving on top of the Empire State Building, winded and happy, the sky soft and red, the city's architecture shining in every direction, my friend raising his hand to wave. Instead, I called him from the platform. I'm so sorry, I said. He told me, stay where you are. I know that neighborhood. I could take you to this place with amazing fish tacos. I thought of my goldfish turning in their pond. Okay, I said tentatively. I waited. I prowled through this neighborhood where I had never been. I enjoyed the sensation of being pursued from one borough into another entirely. When I happened upon a community garden, I slipped inside. It was lush and dark, no pond. An abstract sculpture hulked in one corner, and I put my hand against one of its planes, a sensation like placing a hand on someone's waist. I imagined running into someone I knew. This is my first time here, I would say, and it would be true. What brings me to the neighborhood? I'm meeting someone for tacos. It grew darker, and the moment passed when he should have been calling to say he was close. I reached into my pocket to text him, and I found nothing. I put my hands into my other pockets. I rooted in my bag. I was surprised by the needle of dread I experienced, the sense that something grave was transpiring. I stopped a stranger on the sidewalk through the garden's chain link fence. I asked her to call my number, but nothing. Sorry, honey, said the stranger as she continued on. My fingers clung to the lattice. I retraced my steps, one block, another. My eyes scanned the pavement. I had the sense some essential window was closing, my fate slipping from me, a key moment passing me by. Is it possible? I was relieved. Then I walked straight into my friend. He smelled like some familiar kind of flower, like sweat and the subway. I held onto his arm. I felt like I could kiss him, or was it that he wanted to kiss me? I lost my phone, I said. I would never have found you. He reached into his pocket, and the phone was in his hand. He had no memory of having picked it up in the first place. So then we went to eat our tacos, holding on to each other, certain we were experiencing some divine act. Across the table, we looked at each other with giddy alarm. It was uncanny. We kept laughing. For years afterward, this was our favorite anecdote to tell about ourselves to other people. It made everything feel foretold and essential that would come to pass between us. Connection, love, marriage, the apartment we shared, the trip we took to Ireland, our walks we took on weekends through New York, the restaurant that was our favorite where they had this perfect cake. I liked the sense of gravity that came over people when we told this story. I liked his hand holding onto mine, the force of fate as he spoke. It made it seem possible we had made a mistake. Then one day we were alone when he said, imagine if we had made it to the exhibit at MoMA that day. No queens, no tacos, your phone never goes missing. Instead, Picasso, Calder, Starry Night, Dali's clocks, the angularity of all the glass. I'd have sat with you in the sculpture garden as day became night, and it would have been a different story entirely. We were sitting by the pond, watching the coppery fish twist and preen in the light. I closed my book and held it up to block the sun so I could look at him directly. Something in his facial expression unsettled me, his certainty. I said, I always remembered it as the Cooper Hewitt. I really could have sworn. He frowned and said it wasn't the Cooper Hewitt. I'm certain that it was, I said. He said, I was certainly wrong. He said, I think you're misremembering. This is why I didn't want to come here with you, I was on the verge of saying, but instead I told him I would never misremember. I'm excellent with details. It felt like the garden might wither around us as we looked at each other, our stories diverging. For a moment I felt alone, but then the fish were rising to the surface. They pierced the water in a clear, shining mass and opened their small mouths. It was the Cooper Hewitt, they said to me. It was. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. That was beautiful. Okay, I have a naturally quiet voice. Can you all hear me? I feel like I'm shouting. Yeah, okay. So I'm Jennifer Savran Kelly, and I have my debut novel coming out in February, also from Algonquin, and I'm not reading from that right now. I've written one story in my brief writing career that came from a place of pure joy. I feel like writing usually comes from a place of pain or anguish or wherever. And so this one I wrote from a place of joy, and I just feel like I could use a little joy right now. So I'm going to read this one, and I'm going to read part of it. And if you're interested, it's online, and you can look at the rest. It's called Our Man. Okay. For our 1-year anniversary, I give Amanda a photograph of the two of us in Madrid. We've set the table to approximate our favorite Spanish restaurant, with the blue and white checkered tablecloths, the tall, skinny pitchers of sangria bursting with citrus. It's early in the evening. She's turned up the flamenco music and she's stomping and clapping, shaking her soul loose under the living room skylight. I rise to join her, but she's off somewhere, dancing to the coat closet, and seconds later she's back, with someone in her arms. Dancing to me, she smiles, and when the music ends, her smile breaks into laughter. Do you like him? I look at the strange object. It's a white cylinder, or more accurately, a tall egg, tapering at the top, roughly 2/3 her size. It has a full-body photograph of a man printed on it. He's about my father's age. He's happy and ordinary and unassuming in his brown braided leather belt. He's definitely someone's dad or granddad, some customized gift whose gag has played itself out and now, for some reason, is in our living room, in Amanda's arms. I read online that whimsical gifts are perfect for first anniversaries, she says. When I ran into this guy at a garage sale, I couldn't resist. Wow, I say, still taking him in. I thought you might like to photograph him. She balances the inflatable dad in front of her and puts her arms around him, pretending to laugh at something he said, like she's posing for one of those stock photos that come in picture frames. Her delight infects me. I pull out my camera and snap a few shots, adjusting the aperture as I go. Our man, as we now call him, lives in the kitchen. Amanda has set up a spot in front of the breakfast table where every morning she props him in a tableau for me to photograph, eating breakfast and reading the paper, wearing an apron and cleaning the table or the windows, chopping vegetables. He's wonderfully absurd doing chores with his 2-dimensional arms that never move from his sides. After a few days, I find a new exciting addition next to our man, dry erase markers. Amanda has begun to draw on him, mustaches or makeup, or sometimes both. I marvel at how well she seems to know what will inspire me. I spend more and more time in the kitchen, photographing our man in these domestic scenes, capturing the shine of his lips and the glare on his bald spot. When I've run out of ways to photograph him at home, I seek bigger and better photo opportunities, taking him out on the town, taking pictures of him at the zoo, the park, the art museum, the lake. When I break for lunch, I bring him with me into restaurants and seat him in a chair next to me. And the servers always bring him a side dish and a drink on the house. His unusual shape makes him interesting to strangers who pet him and laugh like he's some nice, funny animal. Everywhere we go, he draws attention. And soon I realize I can use this to my advantage. Instead of setting up my own tableaus, I leave our man out by himself with 2 boxes, one filled with clothing and one with markers. I wander off behind a tree or a wall and wait. It's amazing how many people not only stop to gawk at him, but also dig right in, dressing and making him up as they laugh, propping him up to look like he's watching the lake or the animals or the art. When they leave, I get to work. It's surprisingly intimate photographing the work of strangers, the results of their hands on our man, smelling on him the traces of their shampoo or whatever they ate for lunch. I see that intimacy in every picture, all of which have gone beyond the absurd to take on a strange emotional tenor. When strangers dress our man, he becomes vulnerable to their touch, to their admiration, as well as their mockery. Once, after some teenagers clothe him in a dress of Amanda's and draw full beauty makeup on him, a woman follows behind and deflates him. We're at the water's edge, and I photograph him limp and lifeless, waves lapping at his face, threatening to drag him out to sea. When Amanda sees these photos, she cries and says, maybe the project is going too far. I think she may be right, but I can't stop. I still have too much to learn. I search thrift stores for new outfits and experiment with what clothes and props I leave out with our man. 9 out of 10 times, if I leave both men's and women's clothes, people choose the women's, or both. But when I leave only women's clothes, no one touches them. I make notes. Men in women's clothes, only funny if choice. By and large, people love our man. His unassuming smile, his vanilla outfit. He can be anything to them, a pal, an uncle, a man about town. There are no more acts of hate, but still Amanda worries about him, about us. She leaves notes on our man like, be careful today, and look over both shoulders. I photograph them. I feel close to understanding something important about our man. I come up with a new idea. Instead of photographing him, I take pictures of the people who dress him up. First with our man in the shot, and then without him. Close-ups of their expressions as they examine the fruits of their labor. Laughter, amusement, curiosity, and even sometimes doubt or regret, fear or shock. Our man elicits so many feelings. He's showing me so much about the human heart. Amanda says she has to admit these photos might be my best work yet. But something is still missing. One morning, I meditate over the photos, losing myself in our man's happy gaze, in the stares of the people who've dressed him, in everything their eyes seem to know or think they know about him. When I leave for my photo shoot, I leave our man behind and bring the clothes and some of Amanda's makeup. I go to the park in a black tank top and bicycle shorts and hang a sign on my chest that says, "Dress me." I'm gonna stop there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kvita again. I'm a science fiction fantasy writer, so I will be pulling up those wonderful short stories with the beginning of a novel, because I'm very distinctly not a short story writer. And it's just a bit of the prologue and a bit of chapter one. So little context is needed. It's an adult fantasy about essentially a gladiatorial training school. Yes. So I am 12 years old when Hestia first calls to me, and my nose is bleeding so hard it drips to the stone floor and flashes in the firelight of the hearth. There are people holding my arms behind my back, wrenched so far my shoulders strain. I cannot wipe my nose. It is likely broken, but I am upright, and my opponent is on the floor in front of me, and there are tears coming from their eyes. This, regardless of the specifics, is a victory in my book, but it is small and short-lived. Across from me, near the fire, my friend is about to be thrown about by another bully, and I am too far away to stop it for a second time. So even though I pull one arm free, even though I duck under the swing of my next attacker, I know I will not be across the room fast enough to stop the arc of the fist aiming for Ari. The world narrows to just that sight. My friend Ari with one hand to his blackening eye and the other one raised in surrender, the hearth next to him, bright enough to eclipse my vision. Ari has trained just as much as me for just as long as I have, but he is not a fighter, and so it falls to me to protect him from the older guardians and their brutal lessons. I am about to fail. I hate to fail. I am 12 years old, leaving a trail of blood on the floor when Hestia calls me, voice like the crackle of a fire, like the rustle of an ember, like the roar of an inferno, asking me to let her in, and I let her, without thinking, without hesitation, because I will do anything to stop the bad things coming for Ari. One moment I am by the wall, surrounded by older guardians. The next I am by the hearth, in front of Ari, and I take the punch meant for him and fall to the side, right into the hearth, right into the flames. The room shouts in horror, a bit of roughhousing gone too far, but I am fine, sitting among the coals, unburnt, with a goddess in my head. Things are never the same after that. And then chapter 1. Just before they took me from my father's arms, crying in the mewing way of newborns and fresh off a boat, my father gave me a name, Aletheia, meaning absolute truth. He was not allowed to name me, though, not allowed to keep me, so I was given a new name, Nicodemus, meaning victory of the people. I was born to an unknown woman and to a king of the gold class, so they handed me to the guardians and deemed me a silver, meant to train through my youth and spend my life manning the walls of the city, protecting the people of Res Publica. Then, maybe, if I was lucky, if I was brilliant, I might reach gold class by becoming a philosopher king. Instead, I became a vessel of the goddess Hestia. I am roused from slumber by a kick to the head, an older guardian filing through our bunks to wake us up for the dawn wall shift. My body moves in the same motions it has for the last 1,000 mornings, rolling out from under my thin blanket and standing on bare feet. The room around me is carved of stone, gray and blue in shifting tones. The floor is cool and gritty beneath my feet. The light is beginning to reach for us feebly through the single deep-set window in the wall. I reach up to the bunk above me and shake Ari awake. He is snoring, and the sound cuts off as he jerks up. He realizes it is me and slumps back into his bed. Don't do this to me, he groans. We do this every morning. I grab an arm and pull him out of his bed. He curses as he falls from the top bunk, twists, and lands on nimble feet. Ari is not a fighter, but guardians must be able to fight if they are to stay silvers and not be moved to bronze class. So I taught him, instead, how to get very good at dodging. Here, Cleo says, tossing us each a roll for breakfast. She is up and ready. She rises before the sun and huddles in the classroom with a candle in front of her and a book in her hand, studying. One day, I am sure she will be a philosopher king, and compared to that brilliance, I will be as I've always been, little more than a stray dog at her feet begging for scraps. I catch my roll without trouble, but Ari was mid-yawn, arms thrown wide. He fumbles the catch briefly, and the roll nearly hits the ground before he snatches it up. Gods, keeping up with the two of you is impossible, he says, and bites into the stale, thick bread. Cleo and I share a long look, burning with tension. She does not like to speak to me much anymore, not after what happened between us, but we both revolve around Ari. Full circuit today, Cleo says. I heard the seniors talking. Ari groans at this. A full circuit of the wall will take us all day. I am excited. This is the best way to see Res Publica. This, I realize with a pang, is one of the last times I will see my island. Cleo knows this. I will not be surprised if she was requested to be assigned the full circuit. She has pulled with the senior guardians that even I, daughter of a philosopher king, never had and never would have. That's it. I'll move us right along into our slightly more involved introduction, so you know more about us than local writer. As I mentioned, I'm Kvita. I'm a speculative fiction writer. I write both young adult and adult fiction. I'm represented by Paige Turlip and Laura Runnert at Andrea Brown Literary Agency. And since we're talking today about our process, I'll go over briefly where I am in my own publishing journey. I queried a book, which is essentially submitting it to agents who represent you for about 4 years before signing with my agents in 2020. I queried many a book in that time. I believe it was 4 or 5. And by the time I actually signed with my agents, I had been querying 3 simultaneously, which is a choice I made, I suppose. I signed with them in August 2020, and I went on submission to editors in January 2021 after a couple of months of revision. I've been on submission with that book in adult urban fantasy about witches in New York City ever since. I've gone through a couple of rounds of revision on that book and gone out to editors, new sets of editors a couple times. And I, for a brief period, also had a young adult fantasy on submission. It was on submission from about May 2021 to December 2021 before I had to be pulled and I shelved it. So my focus is currently on the adult and this book that I guess I'm writing for fun in the interim.
Yeah, it's a journey. That's why we called it the journey. Yeah, so again, I'm Jen Savran Kelly, and so my first novel that I will be publishing in February is actually the second novel that I wrote. The first novel that I wrote is an adult literary murder mystery, and I queried agents for that one for about a year, and also tried a few small presses that you don't need agents for, and we could talk about that. And it didn't go anywhere, but by the time I was done querying that, I had the spin novel finished and ready to go essentially a couple months later. So I dusted myself off and I started querying with the agent who, when I'd written my first book, I had pitched an agent in person at a conference. And all she said to me was, I had gotten a grant for it, but basically it cost me $100 for a 15-minute pitch session for my novel. And instead of talking about that novel, she hooked on to the fact that I was a bookbinder in my query letter and said, she spent almost the whole 15 minutes telling me to write a book about bookbinding. I was pretty upset and glad it wasn't my own $100 that I was spending. But I left thinking I will never write a book about bookbinding. And then my second novel is about a bookbinder. So I queried her first, and she very kindly rejected me. And I went on, and it took me about another year of querying agents, and I was about to give up. And I found my agent through DV Pit, which is an online Twitter pitching event for marginalized creators. And I found my agent that way. And then right when we went into lockdown, my agent said, we're ready to go start sending this out to editors. And I said, oh gosh, is publishing even going to exist anymore? And fortunately, we found someone who was interested. And it was a long story of how that became a thing. But so now I have my first book being published in February and working on a couple of other projects with my agent that hopefully will also get published someday. So that's where I'm at. Journey.
Yeah, my short story collection is coming out in July 2023. And, one thing I think was great about writing a story collection was over the years, I was able to submit, you can submit pieces of that book to other places, to journals to be published. I feel like I was getting encouragement along the way that editors at, certain journals were interested in the stories. And so at a certain point I had enough and I could see what they seemed to have in common. I wrote into that a little more, added some more. And I had, what I guess was a pretty smooth process in terms of the querying, but there were glimmers in that of what would sort of be the theme of the whole experience, which is stories are hard. The reputation of short story collections is that no one wants to read them, no one wants to buy them, they're considered a risk. And I think in my mind, I sort of thought, and I think this is maybe common at the point when you're sort of before seriously talking to agents, I just kind of thought the agent will just kind of once there's the agent, they'll just handle everything. And so I signed my agent and, but I was kind of, there was one agent I was talking to who wanted to go an independent press route with the stories. The other agent who I ended up signing with, she said, you should write the beginning of a novel. We'll do it as a partial draft. So you write a partial novel and we'll sell that with the stories. And so we delayed a long time she said, just write a few chapters. And I'm kind of a slow writer. And she kept saying, and she'd say, add one more chapter, maybe add one more chapter. And I remember just being like, oh my gosh, these stories, they're just kind of waiting and feeling like this novel, I wasn't really sure about it. And I felt like their fates were linked. And then we finally did go on submission. That was November 2020. So it was we did it right after the election. And then it was the holidays. And it just, and there's at the beginning, I remember my agent saying to me at the very beginning, there's this moment where she said, all things, relish the beginning because all things are possible right now. This is the list of everyone who's going to read your book in the next couple weeks. And she said, maybe I'll have news for you. It's Thursday. I'll probably have news for you Monday. Not what happened. And so it was 7 months in the end before we sold the book. And at the time, I remember feeling like that was the longest anyone had ever had to go through that. And it's totally not true at all. That's all very relative on the other side. But I feel like whenever I say it was 7 months now, knowing that it's sold, people kind of it's not so bad. But it's hard. The waiting period is really hard. And I think part of what we all want to talk about today is there are waiting periods that you're unprepared for. I hadn't heard anything about that time of just kind of keeping the faith. And it's sort of in someone else's hands at that point. It's kind of on, your agent has the book and it's up to them. And my editor who did, I remember having the conversation with my editor about the book, and she said, we had this conversation. I remember thinking, well, whatever way it goes, she's the one who's going to be, if it's going to happen, and if it's not her, then it's time to shelve this. And I remember thinking either way, I'll know next week. And then it was 6 weeks. And she really used the phrase several times, I'm on the fence, I'm sitting on the fence. And then it's been this interesting process of it took a while to even sort of even though it was great news to sell it, it had been crawling over the finish line and kind of a recovery time of being to be able to be excited and not just feel it was kind of an accident. I don't know. So that's kind of, yeah. So now I'm sort of finishing up edit, and then book sold last summer. It'll come out next summer. So we're kind of at the point where I'm transitioning away from editorial towards some of the more marketing side of things, and continuing to talk about how stories are hard and no one will buy these. So. Thanks. Yeah, so where should we begin?
Well, I want to ask because you mentioned you have your agent through DV and then you went to conferences. I want to ask how you found your agent, where you looked for that, what resources there are for that.
Yeah. remember looking in the acknowledgement sections of books, books I liked, and there's I got a publisher's marketplace account, and so you can look up books you like and see what agent sold that and to what editor. And I just made a big spreadsheet, and I used Query Tracker, which I remember it was great, but also, you know, Query Tracker has this feature where it can tell you how long it on average takes someone to respond. So you can like really have the data on like what it might mean that someone like opened, you know, like hasn't answered yet. So that was like a good side and bad side. But I knew my agent's name. I went to an MFA program. I knew my agent's name because there had been a day when they brought agents in to talk to people. I didn't meet her that day, but I remembered that someone else I knew met her and that he said she was really nice. And yeah, so that's kind of how I went about it. Pretty traditional querying route, I guess.
Yeah, so I started out similarly. I looked at the backs of books that I liked, and the acknowledgements people always thank their agent. So if you love a book and you think, I want to write this way, or maybe I do write this way, maybe that agent would want to represent you too. So that's one great way to look for an agent. And also used Publishers Marketplace. It's a little bit expensive. There's a monthly subscription fee that's up there, but it's a great way to look at what agents are buying and what deals are being made before they're being publicized. So you can see what agents are currently picking up. And Poets and Writers has a really nice section with agents and the kinds of things that they represent online. And then there are these, and I also used Query Tracker to keep track and tried not to drive myself crazy with the data because it is really hard. You're like, well, they get back to people really fast. Why aren't they getting back to me? And then there are these Twitter pitching events that I tried. I thought I had nothing to lose, and I guess I didn't because I ultimately found an agent that way. And I found those just by seeing people on Twitter using the hashtags, and I Googled them and used the ones that I felt fit. And I'm queer and I guess non-binary-ish, genderqueer. I don't know what I call myself. Anyway, and my book that I was querying was queer, so I thought, let me try DB Pit, which is for marginalized, self-identified marginalized writers, and found a non-binary agent who was very interested in my book. So that was the way I did it.
Query Tracker really is a love-hate relationship. Yeah. Whenever I'm going out advice now, I'm like, use it to find agents and then like block the site. Don't look at it while you're actually querying. It will drive you insane. Yeah, I actually signed with my agents out of the pitch contest as well. It was PitMad for me, which is now over. Yeah. It was a huge event by the end, and they canceled it this year. But I had done the same things, like the acknowledgements of books, a little bit of Publishers Marketplace, just like word of mouth, social media. And then there are a lot of like mentorship programs like Pitch Wars and Author Mentor Match that I kept trying to get into and didn't get into, but it like, you know, put me on it helped me see like who was representing all the people who were mentoring at that time and stuff like that. So yeah, it was eventually a Twitter pitch contest that sort of kicked things into high gear because I waited a very long time on agents reading my full. Agents had my fulls for 8+ months, and then I did PitMad, and then I signed with an agent within like a month. So it was a very weird, like a slow fast sort of thing.
It's always hurry up and wait. And I do want to add that in terms of actually querying agents, in terms of trying to actually reach out to an agent, there's a lot of, oh my God, what do I do? And I found that there's so much information online right now. And what I was very heartened to hear was that I went to an event at Cornell where some agents came to talk. I went to a conference that was specifically about the publishing industry that Slice magazine was hosting at the time. And everything that the agents said on those panels matched what I read online at reputable sites. So if you're looking online and you see that, you know, if you're cross-referencing 2 or 3 sites that look reputable because either they're agents that are sort of well-known giving the advice or whatever it is, you can be pretty confident as you are knowing that you're getting the right advice. And it is, I think the thing that's worth stressing is that I think a lot of authors feel like, oh, if I write something that stands out and is different from what everyone else is doing, I have a better shot, but that's actually not true. There's a formula to writing a query letter, and you really need to follow that formula. Otherwise, what you learn when you're on the other side of it is that agents are reading so much all the time, and they need to be able to recognize very quickly the format. They need to be able to know where to look for your bio. They need to know, it's not cute to them if you go outside of that formula. It really just makes it a lot harder for them. And they will just put your thing aside. They won't read it. So that's my big piece of advice. If you're looking to query agents, really follow what they say they're asking for, and don't try to do something fancy.
Stand out in content.
Exactly.
In format.
Right. Let your book be what stands out, not your
Kvita, could you talk a little bit about, like, I feel like a theme when we were all preparing for this was like this, just like coping with waiting, like keeping the faith on what this sort of being on submission experience has been like for you, and I know, and one thing we're all going to talk about was just like things we're wrestling with right now, so maybe where you are right now with all that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of waiting. Like I said, I queried for about 4 years, and I mentioned I was querying 3 books simultaneously by the end, which is not something that a lot of people do. I did that precisely because I was losing my mind waiting, and I essentially wanted to stack my chances as much as possible. I had to start thinking sort of specifically about ways to like get back in control of my own journey, and part of that was just I kept writing, and then I kept submitting the books carefully with strategy, but like multiple books to a bunch of different agents, trying to handle that because I couldn't really handle the wait times. And then now in submission, it feels way different because I can't just decide to put out more books into the world. It's really a conversation, that negotiation with your agent. And I've been on submission for books simultaneously, so clearly you can't really teach a whole lot of tricks. I will just keep trying to do this. And I intend to just keep producing things. I call it my throwing spaghetti at the wall strategy. I'm hopeful these days something will happen. But on submission, the thing I did, in large part, I think to stay sane, was to figure out other ways to further my career that wasn't like getting a book deal. So those mentorship programs I mentioned before, like I realized that I had a bunch of information to give because I've been querying for so long and stuff like that. And so I've been a mentor for a bunch of different programs within the last year or so. And I really found that incredibly enriching to just work with other people through their journeys. And in doing so, to learn a ton about craft, because you're reading so many different people's stuff, and you're really stepping with them through the entire revision process. You learn a ton about your own writing and stuff like that. And I think that's been super useful. And then stuff it's like upkeeping my website and starting a newsletter. Just like little things that I knew would help build my author brand. And that made me feel like I was being productive and I was moving forward, even though, I didn't actually have a deal. I'd love to hear what you guys did. You sound very
in retrospect, it's like it was just so much the ups and downs, and I don't know. I think what I have in common with you, with what you're saying, I think, is that like there was a part of me that always felt like the administrative stuff was always kind of soothing to me. So I could just like, if I felt like I wasn't, I could send more queries, because some people that's like feels like a drag to send more queries, and to me it always felt like I was just happy to like update the letters and find, look for a few more people. But I'm amazed. I'm super impressed that you beginning new projects, and because I got at a certain point I remember just being so hung up on like it's got to be these stories, and the idea of starting something, starting this novel, which I didn't say is that this partial novel didn't sell in the end, and so kind of I remember just feeling like really struggling with with like getting into that, really being invested in this new thing while the fate of something else was sort of hanging in the balance was challenging. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah.
Yes, Tana.
Somebody who was watching online had a question.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know if you could recommend any mentorship programs or mentoring programs.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So DB Pitt actually has, I'm sorry, I'm going to just take this one because DV Pit is the hashtag that I use to get my agent, but they also have a whole mentorship program. They have a free annual conference that has all been online, and you've also done some mentoring, right? Pitch Wars has
Pitch Wars
mentors.
is unfortunately no longer exists. This was the last round.
Oh, because they were
That's
affiliated
the-
with it.
Yeah. There's, I will say, for the DV Pit stuff, it's under the Diverse Voices Inc. sort of umbrella. DV Mentor is actually open right now, I think until the middle of the month, for unagented writers who are just looking for someone to help them get an agent. And then they also have a program for people who have essentially their debut book deal and want some mentorship as they move into debut year. And then I've been a part of Author Mentor Match, which is a January-ish program. Rogue Mentor is open right now, and there's a set for May Mentors. That's another one that's fairly new. And then the Right Team Mentorship Program has a ton of great resources, and I think we'll actually have a formal mentorship program either sometime this year or next year. And then now I'm just going off a list. There's another program I think called Right Mentor, who also has a mentorship program. I think these things tend to be spring or fall-ish. So some of the spring ones have already closed. Some of them are open right now. Otherwise, there's a bunch of fall stuff.
And I actually forgot, I did a formal mentorship with AWP, the Association of Writers and Writing Programs, as a writer-to-writer mentorship program that you can apply for. It's free for members. And when I did it, it was 3 months where you get paired for 3 months, and it's a very formal program where you get these discussion modules. And in my case, my mentor actually read my whole manuscript and gave me feedback on the whole manuscript. So that's a good one as well. Yeah, and so with waiting, for me, I do tend to also write when I'm waiting, because I feel like I'm very out of control when I'm waiting, and I feel more in control when I'm writing, because I really love to write, and it's easy for me to forget that when I'm submitting my work, because I feel like then it just becomes all about like acceptance or rejection, and I forget that I actually just love to do. I mean, most of the work happens by yourself in isolation, hours and hours of just writing, and you have to love that. It's not the kind of thing you do just to get readers, right? Because it's kind of insane. So it reminds me that I actually love it, and it's really about that love. And actually, it's a little strange. Like, I read something recently that really resonated with me, which is you spend so long as a writer just writing for yourself and by yourself, and maybe getting readers here or there, but then suddenly having it go out into the world is also a little bit frightening. Yeah, I think it's Alexander Chi, and I was like, wow, yeah, it's kind of vulnerable because it is very private in a way. And you're also wanting people to have a window into your most private thoughts. So for me, it's just going back to that private, quiet space and writing that makes me feel connected. Yeah.
And related to that, I think the vulnerability, and I found it challenging. It's like a continued learning curve to try, when you sign with your agent, you've had like 1 or 2 phone calls, and people say like, it's like you heard the analogy, or I remember hearing the analogy, it's like a marriage, like you ideally want to stay together, right? And I remember just feeling like, wow, however great my impression is, I'm also like, I remember being an overwhelming moment of really putting it in someone else's hands. And I think as this goes on, it's like I think that approaching the time when we'll go to readers, but even these early steps of trusting the editor, trusting the agent it's vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's more emotionally challenging than I imagined it would be. So, yeah,
for sure. Like you had alluded to, or maybe you had said, when you have an agent and they're sending your book out, it's now out of your hands for the first time. And when you're looking for an agent, it feels out of control in another way, because you don't know when you're going to get the agent, but you're the one in control of the submissions and the time frame, and you're getting all the information as it's happening in real time. And then once you get the agent and they're submitting your book for you, suddenly you just don't know what's going on. And even if your agent is keeping you in the loop, they're filtering
Yeah.
the information that you're getting, and you know that. So it's a little maddening because it's putting your work in someone else's hands. And that actually, there's a question that leads me to that we had talked about a lot on email, which is, when you are feeling vulnerable and you are trusting somebody with your work, what are the important things that you want from that relationship? And I guess I'll start with you. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff on the internet about like what to ask in that 1 or 2 calls you have with your agent, and they're all very useful questions and they can help you sort of weed out a bunch of red flags. But at the end of the day, I feel like you're kind of signing with your agent on like vibes. It's just like a gut thing, and you've never been in that position before where you have an agent, where you've trusted someone to sort of send your work out into the world and be your representative in publishing. And I think it's hard to know what you need until you've actually been in that situation. It's like hard to know what kind of writer you are, what kind of communicator you are, until you've been there, which is why I feel like there's a lot of grace you have to give yourself after a while. Like when you realize, oh, I actually don't want to receive all the rejections from the editors every week. That's destroying me. I want you to give it to me once a month, or I only want you to contact me essentially when you have good news. And so like figuring out how to navigate that relationship is a lot of thinking about, I think, how you work as like a writer and what's conducive to your best process. If you need to be left alone for a while, if you need to be checked in on every once in a while on a regular schedule, and how revision might happen with your agent, how you want them to communicate things that you need to revise versus how you have to gain the confidence to ask them for things. So it's a tricky thing, but I think clear and open communication is the most vital thing, like asking for what you need, telling them when you don't want whatever they're doing, and then listening to them when they give you information because this is their job, and allowing them to sort of take the reins is a big, definitely haven't figured it out yet, still figuring it out, but it is like I think figuring out our communication styles and making sure they matched up was like the basic core tenet that I needed when I signed.
Yeah, and I would say too, you want to make sure, like, just a couple of red flags, because you had mentioned red flags, like an agent should never charge you. They only take commission. They should only ever take about 15% for sales, and then about 20% for subsidiary rights. So if they're asking for more than that, that's a red flag. If they're not part of any professional organizations, that could be a red flag. But essentially, there are certain things you want to look for. And you can, again, check Publishers Marketplace and other places to see, are they actually selling books, right? Because you want to know, like, are they selling books, or have they not sold anything in 5 years? And if not, you might want to ask them why when you speak to them.
You can ask them to put you in touch with other clients.
Yeah.
Like ask for that at the end.
That's right.
But I think also trusting that it's a process that unfolds over time. Like when I look back on it, it's like it just was never going to be possible to know 3 weeks into submitting, like whether, like I just had so many moments where I think I thought I would try to understand if I like had chosen the right, did I choose right? Are we doing it right? And it's like at a certain point you have to just see how it's going to play out. And I think that's a hard part of it. I still feel like I'm wrapping my head around how to approach the fact that it's just true that their jobs are really different from our jobs, and they're different. They have a different kind of way of being in the world than we do. I mean, writers are so private about so many things, and agents are all about the networking, right? Like that's the whole way it works. And so there are just like ways you're different. It's kind of always going to be true. And yeah. Something else, but I don't remember what. Oh, just like there's this moment when I remember feeling like I always say like a switch flip, where it goes from you're querying and you just want anyone to want to talk to you, to like getting an offer. And then I remember just feeling like I don't even know what to ask. They have, and I think it has persisted through the whole experience so far, is that like I have a lot of feelings about like they have this expertise, the editor has expertise I don't, the agent has expertise that I don't, and they've done this so many times and we've never done it. And so that's always feels hard to feel like there are things they know that I don't know, and are there questions I should be asking that I don't know to ask? And that's just kind of a constant thing. I feel like you're trying to just, I feel like you're at the beginning, you're just like soaking up so much about how it all works that you just don't know until you're in it.
Yeah. It's there are books, or at least a book that I know of that I think is called Before and After the Book Deal, and I do think it is good to prepare yourself, because it is like a switch that gets flipped where you go from years of getting rejected and thinking like you're just begging, for scraps, and then suddenly a flip switches and everyone wants to know what you want, and you don't know because no one's ever asked you. Like, I just wanted an agent. So it is kind of good, even though it feels like it's never going to happen. I do think it's good to sort of prepare yourself, because I was a little bit of a deer in headlights, and still am. I feel like I still am. Like I get on the phone with my agent. She asks me questions about things I want, and I don't even know how to answer them. And I feel like, wow, I should have prepared a little more for this. So I would say, believe in yourself and prepare for the day that, because you get a lot thrown at you from the agent, and then when you sign with an editor, you get a lot thrown at you from the editor. And, I didn't know how to handle when my cover came to me. I didn't know how to handle asking if I could see more options. I loved it, but I didn't know. And thank goodness for my agent, she was right on it. She was right on it, and she knew exactly what to do. But had I not asked her, she might not have done anything, So it's just, just try to prepare yourself for that
like
stage.
asking questions of people who have become a writing teacher. Just like sort of as the year, I feel like I wish that over the years of writing the book, I had just asked questions about like, not how do you get an agent, but what do you like about your relationship with your agent? What do you wish you would ask? Were you glad that you asked? Like, what do you appreciate that you didn't know to appreciate then that you do appreciate now? And just to be preparing yourself for that.
And then the other question, how are we doing on time? Because I want to.
I was about to find it. It's actually 6:06.
Oh,
so
okay. We want to
have-
give people time.
Yeah. If anyone has questions, we'd love to hear them.
I feel like we have so much more we can talk. If not, we just.
Well,
Yeah.
the one thing I'd really love to find out if there are any writers groups that I could join. I mean, I would be really grateful to find one. There's one in Candor, and I live just a couple miles north of there. There used to be some very good writers, and one by one they sort of dropped out, and there are two people who think they can write.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna put my friend on the spot. Did we ever make that list? Did we ever put a place together where people can look who are interested in writers? This is my friend Kathy. Everyone, she's also a writer. I'm not sure people on the live stream. Okay, great. So the question was if there are writing groups available locally. So I don't know about you people online. If you're local, this is a good question for you. But we are putting together, I say we, but really Kathy has been putting together a resource.
Well, we had a panel on it like 4 years ago maybe, it's featuring rights, and I stumbled with some links. I don't know if they're currently, I don't know. I have to go back, but I could definitely somehow with the internet. I don't know, are you doing with the websites you're working on or something?
I was, but I wasn't sure, like, just in general, like we talked about having some.
I have a folder on my computer.
Yeah, I would be really grateful to know that. The other thing is, I really love narrative nonfiction. And actually, this is really kind of weird. I did have an agent 25 years ago. The first that I plugged was a story about the and I get nervous that I am not, it looks like maybe I have Alzheimer's, and I might, but there is a way to cope with it. But when I start trying to think of how I'm going to say something, I start to fall apart.
Do you want to chat with us a little bit afterward, maybe? Because I also feel like we could probably give you some more specialized. We're all fiction writers, so maybe we can keep it to fiction, and we could chat with you a little bit afterward about what you're thinking about.
This person, a great fiction writer, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, wrote a a book. It's called Last Minute to See. And it's extraordinary. And it's about exactly the kind of stuff I would want to write about.
Great. Can we talk to you a little bit
Yeah.
after? More?
Beautiful.
Maybe? Have
Yeah.
questions about fiction? Publishing and fiction, yeah.
Yeah. So I understand that there's like the big publishing houses, right? Like the big five and then the smaller ones. Did you have any choice? Did you have like a conscious choice in going towards those or not towards those? And how did you weigh that?
We're in a funny
We're
situation.
We are in a funny situation because we both signed with one of the bigger independent presses, and now they're part of the big five. Oh, we got bought after. So I was going for.
Sorry, do you want to just repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. Yes. The question was, how do you feel about going with an independent, smaller press versus the big five? And I was definitely looking for that sweet spot in the middle where it was big enough that I would feel like I could still get them to pay attention to my book, but not so big that they wouldn't pay attention to my book. So, because what happens at a very small press is sometimes they're just understaffed and under-resourced, and they can't give your book the kind of attention. They also can give you a ton of love, so I'm not putting them down. They are great, but in the scheme of things, that middle place seemed to me to be like the sweet spot. And then the really big ones, like you might have your little debut literary novel coming out at the same time as Stephen King has a new novel, and you can guess who's going to get all their resources. That's happening, right? So we were looking. I was looking to end up somewhere exactly like Algonquin. Most authors don't have a choice. I was like completely floored when it happened and very excited, and then found out a few months later that we got acquired by Hachette. So I don't know what you were looking for.
I don't really feel like I had a strategy. I feel like I feel really lucky that I landed, because I feel exactly the same about Algonquin, that it feels like it's the resources of, they have a lot of resources, and but at the same time it's a smaller list. I remember my editor saying that when we talked on the phone for the first time, that the smaller list, they try to give every book equal attention. And, I think we both had a really great experience with that.
Yeah. And do you have a preference?
I'm pretty much just out with big five houses right now. I think you will find, especially in like genre fiction, that a lot of agents will push you towards that to start. Because it's very hard to make a commission off the small houses and the middle-sized houses. So if they're signing you, they want to make money off you to a certain extent. But like I think a lot of really interesting, especially in the speculative phase, like experimental stuff, tends to happen not at the big houses, but at the mid-size and the small houses. So that's definitely something I'm like, I have my eye on for down the line, depending on how things shake out. But I did, I gave feedback on all the editors that were put on my sub list. So I didn't necessarily pick them because, again, that's part of an agent's expertise, but I did essentially kind of get to vet them based on whatever knowledge I had. I had almost no knowledge, but I pretended I had some and pretty much just said, oh yeah, this book's great. So
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. It's a good question. Any others?
One here, so we can talk about it.
Yeah, we're happy to stay here afterward. If people don't feel comfortable asking in the group, you can just come talk to us. Yes, we're happy to talk to you. Yeah, we just don't want to go over the time.
I have a very important question. Are you all available to do your debut, your launch events at Buffalo Street Books?
I'm part of the store in the development writing group.
Pick a date.
Yeah. Well, Street Books is super interested in hearing from the community about what you want in the way of writing groups and workshops, and we are sort of here to know that. So if you're ever in the store and talk to us about that. Yeah.
And I'm also going to say something. I'm going a little rogue. I'm not really supposed to say this, but I work at Cornell University Press, and we are very quietly starting a fiction list where we're going to be publishing novels and story collections. And I will be acquiring a little bit. So the stories, it's going to be through our Three Hills imprint, which is the regional trade imprint, which means that your story collection or your novel has to have some tie to New York in the setting. It needs to be sort of heavily focused on New York. But if it is, and if it's an adult book, please feel free to contact me or find me online at Cornell University Press and send me your work because I'd love to read it. Great.
Okay. I'm just so happy to see everyone in this room. If you haven't put your name and email on this clipboard, please do so. I'm going to put it on that table. After the entire Spring Rights Literary Festival is over in June, I really want to send everyone a survey to hear how you heard about the event. It will really help us with our marketing next year and know where to spend money and where we didn't need to spend money. So, oh, and tonight at 7:15, there's a Zoom Afrofuturistic Speculative Poetry. So that's going to be really cool. And please pick up I have some flyers that list all the rest of the Spring Rights events at the back table.
And
So thank you for coming.
Come see Kenneth on Wednesday.
Oh yeah, and Kenneth. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what Kenneth's doing, so you can tell us. You're doing Race in America, a rehearsal. It's a film, but this is a spoken. You're going to rehearse with the other actors.
Yeah, so it's a live reading of some of the scripts from the film H. It's a short film, 8 short scripts about race in America. So myself and Chris Holmes have written several sort of short skits about race in America, and then what we're going to do is going to be sort of a live reading to our audience to get some feedback on it and just sort of share our experiences around that as well.
And that's in this room on Wednesday. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
I know.
So,